Hello everyone, my name is Zick. I am a current Unreal player in Fortnite Rocket Racing in Season 0. I wanted to make a video today because I haven't seen really anyone make any videos on this topic yet, which I'm a little surprised. So I figured I might be one of the first to do it. And I usually don't do videos like this, but again, I kind of want to help out the people in the community that might be struggling or wondering how you can get better at drifting, which is going to be the topic of this video. And this is just one portion of the mechanics to rocket racing, but drifting is arguably the most important, or one of the most important. So yeah, today I wanted to go through all the different types of drifting. There's some mechanics that people have found while playing the game, and so I'm going to go over those. I'm going to show you how you can gradually gain skill in drifting, and how you can learn some new mechanics and really utilize it in different maps. Today I loaded up just a private match on Festive Falls. This is a map that has a good amount of corners where I can show how to use different drifting techniques. This could be a good one for you to practice on as well. There's plenty of other maps that you can practice on. You can practice on pretty much any of them. I would suggest if you're at a beginner level, a beginner and intermediate, just stick with practicing on any of the maps that don't have a lot of hazards, so any of the novice or intermediate ones. But if you're wanting to really get precise with drifting and just learning how to be really accurate with it, feel free to go onto any of the expert maps. So I'm going to go in order through various drifting techniques. I'm kind of ordering these on like easiest to hardest. But you can feel free to skip around to whichever one you need to learn about the most. So you can also see my controller on the top left, so you can always see my inputs. As you can see when I'm pressing my drift button, which is going to be my left bumper, which I may as well start out with that. If you are a new player to the game, I would highly suggest separating your drift bind to your air dodge bind. Okay, so by default, I use a PS5 controller. By default, it had my square button as both my drifting and the button I use to dodge while in air. I had to separate those to be able to do some more advanced mechanics, so I would highly suggest you start getting used to having those on two different buttons as soon as possible, and you can just get used to that as you go throughout your rocket racing journey. So first off, what I want to talk about is drift canceling. Okay, so when we start a drift, typically the way it's going to end is your car straightening out, and the game will do that naturally. So if I drift around this corner, and as I come to the end of it, if I just let go of everything on the controller, it'll straighten out and I'll get that boost. But if I want to cancel it sooner so that I can get that speed boost sooner, I can drift in the opposite direction very quickly, and that will cancel it out. So if I start a drift to the right, I can press my drift button and left again very quickly, basically just tapping it, and then I'll set my car back straight quicker than if I let it do it naturally. So if I'm going left through this tunnel and I hit drift to the right, it's going to straighten that out quicker. You can just see me do it again on my controller. I'm going right, cancel left, drifting right, cancel left, drifting left, cancel right, and like that. And so that's one way you can keep up speed, especially on like long straights and stuff, and that's what a lot of people do. So drift canceling is something I would highly suggest getting used to. And once you're used to drift canceling, you can then move on to drift chaining. Drift chaining is very similar, except you're just continuing the drift in a different direction, okay? So I'm going to go into turn 1 here and I'm going to drift right, but if I want to turn that drift to the left, I'm basically just holding the drift button and the opposite direction. So I'm going to start drifting left, and I'm going to press my drift button again and go right. And as I hold it, it's going to keep the car in the drift motion, but going in the opposite direction. So if I want to cancel, I just tap it. If I want to drift chain, I hold it. So left and then holding to the right, that's going to chain it to the right, and you can just do this infinitely. Just do this as much as I want. As long as I just keep going different directions. I know it's a little weird because I'm on a roof of a tunnel, but left, right, left, right, left, right. You just do it infinitely, and you can build up your bar all the way to max if you want to. So again, if you want to drift chain, you just got to hold your drift button a little bit longer than if you were canceling. I also, I apologize if any of this does sound confusing. I'm kind of doing this without a script. but I kind of hope that you guys can kind of get an idea. And again, especially just watch me how I use the controller to get an idea of how I'm doing things. So moving on from drift chaining, I want to go over the difference of short drifts and long drifts, and this kind of has to do with the speed that you get from drifts, but it is kind of important to understand it, especially as you get into the intermediate ranks. So a short drift is literally just drifting for like a second or two, not even that, and then letting it go. That's usually going to put your speed to about roughly 650. You can use that in any short turns or any just like windy roads pretty much if you just want to keep your speed consistent above 600. And then if you want to do a long drift, like around a really long bend or anything like that, that's just putting your bar, that's just filling up your drift bar by like more than 70%, I would say, and that's usually going to put you up to 780 plus or 800. Okay, so the reason I'm going over it, I just realized I'm on lap 3 now. The reason I'm going over it though is because you're going to find out in specific strategies on maps that there are going to be specific points where it's better to do a quick short drift and then lead into a long drift. And then there's going to be certain times where you just do one long continuous drift. Okay, so here's how you can see, here's a way to explain how it's utilized and why it's important. So if I want to go around this long bend here in this tunnel, I can do two things. I can either do one long continuous drift around the whole thing, and then let it go towards the end of the corner, and that's going to put my speed up to like 800. Okay? The problem though with that is that while I was drifting that whole time through the corner, my speed was at 570. So I was honestly going slow through that corner. Okay? If I want to keep my speed up through the corner while doing a long drift, I will do a short drift prior to it. So I will go into this, I'll do a short drift first. That's going to put me up into green speed, and then I'm going to do a long drift after. And then by the time my speed's about to go back down to blue, I'm going to finish that long drift, and I'm still going to end up going 800 at the end of it. And if you're wondering what I mean by blue and green speed, when you look at your speed bar, your kph, basically max default speed or max blue speed is 570 in ranked matches. And then anything above that would be green. And that basically just means, hey, you had some boost applied to your speed, you're going over the cap. Okay? So again, if I do one long drift, I'm going to be at blue speed this entire time. And then I'll let it go and hit 800. But if I do a short drift first, I'll just turn myself around here. If I do a short drift first, then I'll be like over 600 as I go through and do a long drift. And then I can let it go and do 800. Now, as you get to the highest of ranks, you'll really have to start learning what's more worth it. Is it worth it to keep your speed low throughout the turn and just do one long drift? Or is it more worth it to do a short drift first and then do a long drift? There's actually times and places for those. But that can be talked about in a different video. I kind of just want to go over what the differences are so you know what people are talking about whenever they bring it up. Okay, so for this next part of the video, I just want to go over a quick thing that will eventually lead into a more advanced mechanic. But if you haven't already been doing it, I would suggest getting used to drifting while upside down, mainly on ceilings, so like the ceiling of this tunnel, or any upside down roads you might find on any of the maps. Now, there is a option to change how your controls get inverted. For me, I think I have it on the default setting, where if I'm on the roof of this tunnel and I drift to my left, my car is going to point left, and I'm going to be going left. If you would prefer it to be the other way, or any of the other options that the game gives you on its invert settings, feel free to do it. Either way though, I would get used to drifting upside down so you are comfortable with this. This is going to be needed pretty much for the next advanced techniques that we're going to go over. Alright, so the next technique I want to go over is called drift stalling, or drift air stalling. There's probably multiple names out for it, but I just call it drift stalling. Basically what it is when you start a drift, then your car goes in the air, whether that's you jumping or you falling off of something, and then you hold that drift through the air until you land on another surface, and then when you land on that surface, you finish the drift and you get a boost on that surface instead. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to show you guys how to do just a normal drift stall. This isn't like the best place to show you an example, but I'm just going to kind of create it here. So to do a drift stall, you're going to have to start a drift first, and then stalling it is always in the air. So I'm going to end up doing a jump after my drift, and then I'm going to hold that drift through the air, land, and you'll see that I continue that drift after landing. Okay, so here I go. So you can see there, I started a drift, I jumped up in the air, I landed, continued the drift, and then finished it. Do it again. Started it, jump, landed, continuing, finish. Okay? Now this is going to come in handy on mainly a lot of the intermediate and expert maps. You can use this to jump over hazards, you can use this to jump gaps, anything like that. The way you do it is you will just start a drift, and when you are in the air, you will continue to hold your drift button until you land, and when you land, you will then again continue to hold your drift button if you want to continue the drift, and then let go of your drift button whenever you want it to end. So, drift button, jump, still holding it, now I let it go. If you want to, you can just start the drift. So start it, jump, land, then let it go. So you don't really need to continue the drift afterwards. It's up to you whenever you want to finish it. The mechanic here though is holding the drift through the air. That's what I'm trying to get at. And basically just how you do it is you hold your drift button while you're in the air. That's all it is. There's a lot of clips of people doing this, and I always see people asking how do they do it. You just hold your drift button while you're in the air. And preferably, you know, if you're going a certain direction, so I'm drifting to the right, you don't have to hold your stick to the right as well. You can just let it go as you're through the air, and then when you land, you continue to steer yourself. Or you can continue holding it to the right if you need. Be aware though, if you are in the air and you're moving your left stick to control your vehicle might move in the air and might mess you up a little bit. But it's up to you, whatever you're more comfortable with. I would probably get comfortable too with when you're in the air, let go of your left stick and just let it control it itself. So sorry that's a little confusing, but that's how you drift stall. So now what we're going to do is we're going to combine the last two things I went over into the last mechanic I'm going to talk about in this video. And I don't think there's really a set name for this yet. However, one of the other Unreal players that I know of has called this a mirror drift, so I'm just going to go off of that. Credit goes to Frost for that. He's the one I heard call it that, but I'm sure there's other names that people have already been calling it. You know, it's whatever you want to call it. But mirror drift is going to be one of the most current advanced techniques when it comes to drifting in the game. And this, in my opinion, is going to be one of the most important things for any high-ranking player to learn. Okay? This is going to start being used a lot, especially on the higher level maps. So if you plan on going really far in this game, and you plan on getting an advantage on people, I would highly suggest learning this whenever you feel comfortable. And I dare say this is going to be a must-need mechanic for the future of rocket racing at high ranks. Okay, so a mirror drift is when you start a drift on one surface, such as a ceiling or a floor, and then you take that same drift and you're going to carry it to the opposite surface. So if I start a drift on the ceiling, I'm going to carry the drift to the floor. and then I'm going to release the drift on the floor. I'll show you an example here. This is where I can do it on this map. So coming out of this tunnel in Festa Falls, I can do a drift here, and then let my car fall off, and it's going to carry that drift to the floor and then release it. Okay? Now, if I had a better angle there, I could have continued to drift while I'm on the floor. I'll see if I can get a clip of that now. Alright, so there you saw that I was able to take the drift from the ceiling, land on the floor, and I even changed directions with the drift and then let it go, and I was getting the boost on the floor. So, if you're asking why is this useful, basically you're able to start your drift a little bit later than if you were to finish it on the same surface you started it, and if you start the drift on this, or if you finish the drift on that second surface, you're going to ultimately carry more speed a further distance. So this is when you start really getting into the technical side of this game. If you haven't noticed already, whenever you're in the air, your car is going to start losing speed. It's basically going to start lowering your speed the more you mess with it in the air. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's what I've noticed. I think a couple of other people have noticed that as well. But so like, let's say you start a drift and you finish on this ceiling and then you jump down. That time that you're jumping down from the ceiling to the floor is time that the game is spending lowering your speed. It's really hard to explain, but this might be another better way to explain it. Whenever you do a drift and your speed's going to go up to like 730 there, okay, the game's going to keep it at that speed for a certain amount of time. And then after that certain amount of time, it's going to start lowering it back to blue speed, like 570, which is your cap. Okay? Doing the mirror drift will maximize the time that you are having that green speed. Okay, that's kind of like the technical side behind it, why it's important. Another way to kind of explain it, I guess, is just starting the boost from the drift on the same surface you plan to continue it on is better than starting it on a separate surface. It's hard to explain, but that's really just the best way I can word it. So how do we do it? We're combining our skill of drifting on opposite surfaces, such as ceilings, and we're combining it with drift stalling. Okay? So I'm going to start a drift, and then I'm going to drift stall as I fall to the floor, and then when I hit the floor, I'm going to let it go. Okay? Now, there are two ways to get from one surface to another. And before I go over that, let me show you just the opposite way. Alright, so here we are at the tunnel again. So, the last clip you saw me, I did it from the ceiling to the floor. You can also do this the opposite way, where you do it from the floor to the ceiling. So if I start a drift down here, I can jump and flip myself up to the ceiling and continue the drift. I continued the drift that I started on the floor, I carried it up to the ceiling, and then got myself that drift boost on the ceiling instead of the floor. I'll do that one more time. Drift, jump, ceiling, still drifting, let it go. Okay. There is one way to go from the floor to the ceiling, and then two ways to go from the ceiling to the floor. Now, you could technically say there's two ways for both, but when you're going from the floor to the ceiling, it's, I think, just indefinitely easier and more consistent to do it this way I'm going to show you. So to go from the floor to the ceiling, you're going to start a drift, jump, air dodge up while holding the drift button, and then when you land on that ceiling, you're going to continue that drift, and then you can let it go whenever you want. So again, the sequence there, though, was drift, jump, air dodge up, while holding the drift button, and then you continue the drift on the ceiling. And again, you can see the controller of how I'm using my inputs. Okay? Now, when you go from the ceiling to the floor, there's two ways to do it. If you start a drift on the ceiling, you can start the drift, jump, and let your car come down to the floor while holding the drift button. And then the drift will continue on the floor and you can release it whenever you want. Okay? So that time, the difference was I did not air dodge. I start a drift on the ceiling, I just click my jump button, I land on the floor, and I can release the drift whenever I want. From the ceiling to the floor, you can use air dodge if you would like. So I'm going to start a drift on the ceiling, jump, air dodge, land on floor, continue drift, and I released it. And while I was jumping and air dodging, I was still holding my drift button. Okay? So again, there's two different ways. You can drift, and then jump, and then let it go at the end. And when I jumped, I was still holding my drift button. Or you can drift, jump, dodge down, and then release the drift when you hit the floor whenever you want. And again, while I jumped and dodged, I was still holding my drift button. So, what is the difference between just jumping and letting your car hit the other surface versus using an air dodge? The difference is the direction your car will be going when you hit the second surface. So, if I start a drift going to the right and I just jump, my car is going to land going left. Okay? This is also the same if you just let your car fall off the surface. So like, if I'm going to the end of this tunnel, I'm going to drift right, my car fell off the roof, and look, it's going left as I land on the road. Okay? If I wanted to keep going right, I would have to drift chain back to the right. Show you one more time. Going right, fall off, now it's going left. Okay? If I were to use an air dodge going down, that would keep me going to the right. So drift right, air dodge down, I'm still going right. That's the difference. And so that is something you'll need to know to have better control of your car when going through certain maps. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a more advanced map and show you a great example of where this can be used and utilized, especially at the top tier tracks. Okay, so here we are on one of the expert maps. This is Cliff Runner 2. Currently I am at turn 3, maybe 2 of the track. This part is fairly early on though. This is when you are coming out from all the hazards on the road there, and you are about to go through this little mountain here. Now you can see above me there is a wooden ramp that has a boost pad up there. And so let's think of a couple ways we could hit that. We could come around the corner and we could jump and boost up just like that. So we jump, we dodged up, that's what I should have said. And we hit the pad and we just kept going straight. That time I went to the roof. You know, we can just jump up, dodge up, hit it. And that's pretty much it. That's like the only way that you could really see yourself consistently hitting that ramp, is if you were to come over here, take a right turn, and then jump, dodge up, and you hit it. Okay, well, there's another way we can do it. And that is with mirror drifting, or whatever you want to call it. And this is how it's going to look. So that whole sequence right there is how it looks to maximize that boost pad to the best of your ability. Okay. So to do it again, I'm starting a drift, I'm jumping here, dodging up and then quickly dodging down. And because I dodged up, it kept me in the same drifting direction that I started with. And when I dodged down, it continued that same direction, okay? If I were to drift here, dodge up, and just jump down, it's going to make me go left. But if I dodge down, it will continue to go right. And that's how I can continue the drift going around the entire corner. Just like this. So if you're wondering why I'm jumping fairly early on and keeping myself hovering in the air, it's mainly just because there's a lot of bumps in the dirt here. So it's just to keep myself more consistent and smooth. I'm just starting a drift and then I'm kind of hovering over all those bumps down there and I'm able to hit it and go forward. So that is a great example of how mirror drifting can be used on the higher maps and at the higher levels of ranked. Again, I would highly suggest starting to learn how to do this. I also want to say, I completely forgot to mention this towards the start. One of the first people that I first saw utilize this or mess around with this technique is someone by the name of Drift King. So I want to give credit to him for making this popular. He has put a lot of clips out there of himself doing it, mainly for freestyling. But just like how stuff kind of went in Rocket League, a lot of this freestyling stuff is going to have to start being used in actual ranked matches, and making the most out of it. So I want to give credit to him. I'm sure there's plenty of other high-ranking people that have found this out on their own or have done it on their own. But I just know that Drift King has done a lot of clips of it, and so I want to give a deserved shout out to him. So anyways, that is going to be the end of this drift video. Again, apologies that it was kind of all over the place or if things were explained poorly. I did this without a script, and overall I'm not like the best at explaining stuff. But I hope that with the help of seeing what I did on my controller, you can kind of understanding of how advanced the drifting can get, and maybe you learned one or two new things through watching this video. So thank you all again. I plan on making probably one or two more guides on a couple of other things in the future, if I see fit. And with that being said, I hope you guys all take care, have a good one, and I'll see you in the queues.